A Stage 2 certification audit for a high-volume fintech AI lending platform has finally reached its final hour. The lead auditor delivers the verdict. The organization's artificial intelligence management system has been denied certification. The raw observational data collected over days of auditing initially paints a compliant picture. The audit team logged 26 positive conformities across various technical and administrative departments. This dashboard displays the final tally. Alongside 26 neutral conformities, the audit identified 4 minor nonconformities in yellow and 2 major nonconformities tagged certification not granted. These 2 major findings carry disproportionate weight, acting as absolute barriers that halt the entire certification process. There is a tendency to view the close of an audit as an administrative wrap-up, a brief meeting to hand over a pass or fail checklist. The closing phase is actually a rigorous analytical consensus. It requires auditors to take disparate, localized observations and map them onto a standardized matrix of systemic risk. To translate these raw findings into a definitive, legally defensible certification recommendation, auditors must strip away subjectivity entirely. This translation follows a strict chronology: an internal final review, the generation of an objective report, and activating a corrective action engine. By forcing an organization to address systemic root causes rather than patching localized symptoms, the closing phase validates the integrity of the ISO 42001 standard. Before facing the auditee, the audit team isolates themselves for a 2 to 4 hour internal final review. The agenda begins with the consolidation of findings. Auditors cross-reference their notes by clause, identifying duplicate observational data and merging related anomalies. The central task of this meeting's classification. Every anomaly must be categorized using an objective framework. This decision matrix compares major nonconformities, minor nonconformities, and observations across systemic impact, risk, and repeat occurrences. Looking at the minor column, criteria dictate an isolated incident with low to medium risk that doesn't immediately threaten the AI system's primary objectives. Mapping the fintech's failure here, exactly 1 out of 20 staff missed required training, an isolated administrative lapse. Conversely, the major nonconformity column targets systemic failures, presenting high risk to AI objectives or a history of unresolved previous findings. A major nonconformity directly impacts the certification recommendation, creating an immediate hard stop. The audit team mapped the fintech's first major failure to clause 6.1.4, the total absence of impact assessments for 2 specific models, instant loan and credit score. These systems pose potential financial harm to consumers. Missing impact assessments for financially consequential models is a structural failure in risk identification, clearly warranting a major classification. The second major failure fell under clause 8.4. The team discovered that 15% of high-risk AI decisions lacked mandatory human oversight logs. Contrast this with the single missing training record. Missing auditability controls across 15% of a high-risk system compromises the structural integrity of the entire management system. Classification relies entirely on this algorithmic mapping. A major nonconformity exposes a fracture in the system's architecture, necessitating an immediate halt to certification. Once the internal team classifies the findings, they translate the data into the official ISO 19011 structured audit report. The executive summary of this report must be concise and entirely stripped of subjective language. It relies solely on evidence. This modular block diagram breaks down the ISO 1911 audit report. It flows from a 1-page executive summary down into granular clause-by-clause evidence. Sections 7 and 8 separate the nonconformities from recommendations, isolating mandatory structural fixes from optional continuous improvement. The operational delivery of this structured data takes place during a 60 to 90-minute closing meeting with the auditee's management team. This timeline lays out the meeting's strict agenda, emphasizing psychological sequencing. It begins with 5 minutes for positive findings, followed directly by 20 minutes for presenting nonconformities. Leading with commendations establishes baseline competency and reduces defensiveness before critical failures are addressed. When presenting the nonconformities, auditors rely on a specific lexicon. Findings are framed with phrases like, "The evidence supports the conclusion that," Subjective phrasing is prohibited. Auditors never say, "You failed," or "This is a major problem." Anchoring the presentation in objective evidence depersonalizes the failure. The management team is forced to engage with the data rather than argue with the auditor. Delivering the non-conformities does not end the audit process. It pulls the trigger on the organization's internal remediation engine. This operational mechanism is known as the Corrective and Preventative Action Framework, or CAPA. Under Clause 10.1, corrective action aims to eliminate the root cause of a failure that has already occurred. Under Clause 6.1, preventative action mitigates potential future risks before they materialize. This flowchart visualizes the CAPA process. It begins with nonconformity identification, drops into root cause analysis, moves to action plans, implementation, and effectiveness verification. At root cause analysis, organizations deploy tools like the 5 Whys to locate the failure's actual source, not just surface symptoms. The speed at which this process must execute is dictated entirely by the classification matrix established earlier. This table compares enforcement timelines. For minor nonconformities, organizations have 30 days to develop an action plan and 90 days to implement the fix. For major nonconformities, the timeline drastically accelerates, demanding immediate containment, root cause analysis within 14 days, and a complete 30-day fix. For the fintech case study, missing human oversight logs triggered this accelerated response, requiring management to present a formal corrective action plan within 5 days. The auditor retains one final responsibility. The nonconformity remains open until a follow-up audit explicitly verifies the effectiveness of the implemented fix. The CAPA engine legally obligates organizations to repair their systems. This mechanism ensures that an ISO 42001 certificate corresponds to verified operational controls rather than unchecked administrative claims. After the CAPA timelines are set and the closing meeting adjourns, the audit process itself is subjected to external scrutiny. The auditing body maintains its own integrity through a required post-audit feedback mechanism. This circular diagram illustrates the audit program review loop. It collects metrics from the auditee regarding fairness, scope communication, and evidence-based reporting. This feedback links to auditor self-reflection, forcing the team to evaluate their objectivity, communication, and evidence collection. By institutionalizing this meta-analysis, certification bodies ensure their audit programs resist bias and maintain rigorous standards over time. For the FinTech AI platform, the final outcome was conditional readiness for certification, pending a successful 30-day re-audit of the 2 failed clauses. The strict application of the classification matrix successfully prevented a high-risk financial AI system with missing safety controls from achieving unwarranted market trust. Because the report structure relied exclusively on objective data, the fintech management accepted the findings without defensive resistance. And because the CAPA timelines enforced immediate containment, the company began structural repairs to their model validation procedures within days. The closure of an ISO IEC 42001 audit translates abstract governance policies into verified operational safety measures, providing the final validation for the entire management system.